They buried him on a Thursday. The kind of Thursday that didn't feel like a weekday at all. The sky was gray, but not stormy. The air was cold, but not sharp. It was just quiet. Too quiet. I stood in the back row, holding a small white umbrella I found in the trunk of my car. The same umbrella I used when Emma was 5 and wanted to splash in puddles on a rainy afternoon. Now, she stood 3 rows ahead of me, stiff between her aunt and uncle. She looked smaller than I remembered. Like grief had shrunk her into something fragile. She wasn't holding her bunny. And that's when I knew something inside her had shut down. No one asked me to come. No one offered a seat. I wore my plainest black coat, my hair tied back neatly, no makeup. Not out of humility, but because grief had left no room for vanity. I was the shadow behind the mourners. Not family. Not friend. Not welcome. Just the nanny. That's what they always called me, never Maya, never Ms. Thompson. Even after 10 years. Even after all the scraped knees, late-night fevers, and birthday cupcakes made from scratch. Even after I stayed when everyone else left. Now the only person who ever looked me in the eye. The only one who spoke to me like I mattered. Was being lowered into the earth. Edward Montgomery. They said he was powerful. Influential. Cold. But to me, he was the man who once left a post-it on my bedroom door that read, "Order extra juice boxes. Emma's got a field trip." He remembered things. Little things. Important things. The others called him difficult. I called him decent. The day Julia died, Emma's mother, Edward had answered the door with trembling hands and an infant he didn't know how to hold. He'd looked at me, eyes hollow, and whispered, "She won't stop crying." Then after a beat, more to himself than to me, "Neither will I." I stayed that night. Then the next. Then for a decade. What started as a short-term contract became a life. A rhythm. A love that didn't need titles to be real. And now I was being erased. Again. After the service, I stood off to the side while everyone else filed into their cars. A light drizzle turned into mist. People offered hugs, traded memories, made vague promises to keep in touch. I didn't get any of those. Just a glance from Caroline, his eldest, cold enough to remind me where I stood. When we returned to the house, I stepped through the front door like a stranger. Not a single photograph in that foyer had me in it. Not one. I was halfway up the stairs to pack my things when I heard her voice behind me. "Caroline. You can pack your things, Maya. We'll wire your final paycheck by Monday." Just like that. No preface. No emotion. She stood there in her funeral dress, pearls resting perfectly against her collarbone. And fired me like she was reading from a script. I turned slowly, almost hoping I had misunderstood. "What about Emma?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She didn't flinch. "Emma will be fine. She's 13. She'll adjust." Adjust. Like grief was something you wore until the season changed. Like I hadn't been the one tying her shoes since she was 2. Like I hadn't stayed up with her after every nightmare. I didn't argue. Because I knew better. They never saw me. Not really. To them, I was just another function of the house. Like the thermostat. Or the vacuum. But what they didn't know, what Caroline was about to find out, was that Edward Montgomery didn't share their blindness. He saw everything. And long before he left this world, he left something behind. Not in an envelope. Not in a bank account. But in his own voice. A voice that would echo through those cold, silent walls. and remind them exactly who I was. And what he had chosen. I first stepped into the Montgomery house when Emma was only 7 days old. Her mother, Julia, had died from a rare complication. Unexpected. Unforgiving. One of those things that doctors explain in long, clinical words that still somehow end in silence. Edward opened the door himself. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. The kind of tired that lived deep in the bones. He was holding Emma in a receiving blanket. His tie was crooked. His cufflinks didn't match. But his hands were steady. "She won't stop crying," he said softly, eyes barely meeting mine. "Neither will I." That night, I stayed. He hadn't even asked me to. There was no formal contract, no clear role. Just a nursery that still smelled like fresh paint. A baby that refused to sleep. And a house echoing with the absence of a woman no one was ready to lose. I stayed the next night, too. And the next. Soon, weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. At first, I was a fill-in. A temporary solution, they said. Then I was the help. Then the nanny. Then just Maya. But to Emma, I was the world. Her first steps were clumsy, teetering toward the sound of my voice. Her first words, "Nana," were whispered as I rocked her at 3 a.m. Singing lullabies I barely remembered from my own childhood. I was the one who caught her when she fell off her bike for the first time. Who stayed up all night when she had chickenpox. Who told her bedtime stories with different voices for each character. When she had nightmares, she crawled into my bed without a word. When she had growing pains, I rubbed her legs with warm cloths and hummed quietly. I took her to every dentist appointment. Waited outside ballet recitals and piano lessons. Camera always ready. I hand-washed her favorite dress after every art project. Braided her hair like her mother's in the old family portraits. Slipped little notes into her lunchbox that said things like, "You're braver than you feel. You are deeply loved." I sat through parent-teacher meetings. Stayed up helping her with science projects. Held her hair back when she threw up from too many funnel cakes at the fair. I listened to her stories. All of them. Even the ones that rambled or made no sense, because they mattered to her. But when guests came over, I vanished. Caroline once told me, flatly, casually. "If anyone asks, just say you're with the household staff. It's less confusing." Less confusing for whom? I had my own room on the 3rd floor. Tucked behind the linen closet. No window. One small lamp. A single dresser. No one else ever went up there. I decorated it with drawings Emma made. Photos I took secretly on my old phone when she wasn't looking. A ceramic frame she painted that said, "Almost Mom." To me, that little room was home. To them, it was a polite distance. A quiet reminder. I was not one of them. And yet, when Edward got sick, it wasn't Caroline who managed his meds. Or Nathan who made the emergency appointments. It was me. I kept a clipboard beside his bed. Tracked every dosage, every cough, every drop in appetite. I stayed up reading about his condition. Tweaking his diet, keeping the nurses honest. The night he collapsed, I was the one who found him. He had fallen in the hallway. I heard the thud. Ran to him barefoot. And screamed for help while trying to lift his head off the floor. The ambulance came fast. I rode in the front seat. I remember thinking it was the first time I'd ever sat there in that uniform. And maybe the last. In the hospital, I held his hand. He was pale. His lips dry. But his grip. Still strong. He looked at me with more trust than I'd seen in years. Promise me, he whispered. Promise me you'll stay. You'll get better, I said, brushing his hair from his forehead. He squeezed my hand tighter. Promise me you'll look after Emma. Until she finds her own voice. I nodded, tears spilling freely. I promise. That was the last thing he ever said to me. And I meant every word I gave him. But now. Caroline had erased me in a single breath. A single sentence. As if 10 years of loyalty, sacrifice. Late nights, lost weekends, missed birthdays. Could be repackaged into a final paycheck and a polite goodbye. I packed my things that night. No ceremony. No hugs. No final glances. 3 boxes. That's all it took to carry 10 years of invisible motherhood. 1 box for clothes. 1 for books and old letters. And 1 for memories I wasn't supposed to have, drawings, photographs, birthday cards written in crayon, a tea-stained mug that said, #1nanny, with the handle cracked but still whole. I did it in silence. I moved through the house like a ghost, careful not to make noise. It didn't feel like I was packing. It felt like I was erasing myself, room by room. No one helped. No one noticed. Except the dog, Bruno, who followed me to the stairs, tail low, eyes confused. Even he seemed to understand that something was being taken from the house that wouldn't return. No one said goodbye. No knock on my door. No note slipped under it. Nothing. Emma wasn't even told I was leaving. Caroline made sure of that. It'll be easier for her this way, she said from the hallway. Like pulling someone's heart out without anesthesia was a gentle favor. That night, I stood at the doorway of Emma's room one last time. She was asleep, fists curled near her face, her mouth slightly open like when she was little. Her stuffed bunny half off the bed. I didn't wake her. I just walked in, as quietly as I could, and tucked a note into her favorite book. The one we used to read together every night before bed. Just 4 words, scribbled in my shaky handwriting. I'm always with you. I placed it gently under her pillow, right next to the small wooden locket she made for me in 2nd grade. It said, "Almost Mom." That locket had survived school backpacks, bathwater, and a tumble in the dryer. But it had never left her nightstand. Not once. I kissed her forehead without letting myself cry. I couldn't. Because if I started crying, I wouldn't be able to walk out that door. So I turned away. Box in hand. And I left. I thought that was it. That the next time I saw that house, it would be in the rearview mirror. Shrinking, fading. Just another chapter I'd never get to rewrite. But 2 days later, a letter arrived. Typed. Formal. Cold. From the Montgomery family attorney. You are requested to attend the reading of Edward Montgomery's will. Attendance required. Required? Why? I wasn't family. I wasn't even employed. But still. I went. Not out of hope. Not out of curiosity. Out of respect. Because no matter what they thought of me, Edward Montgomery had been a man of his word. And he had seen me. In ways no one else in that house ever had. When I returned, the house felt different. Not just sad. Vacant. Too clean. Too quiet. Like the grief had been sanitized into polite silence. Emma was nowhere to be found. I searched the corners of the room without meaning to. As if her voice might still be echoing in the walls. The family was already seated in the drawing room. Caroline in dark navy. Nathan in gray. Their spouses dressed in muted tones like it was a photo shoot for a luxury magazine ad titled, "Morning, Elegantly." They didn't look up when I entered. Didn't acknowledge me. But I heard Caroline whisper to her husband, lips tight. She's probably hoping for a thank you check. Like I was some gold digger who had hung around too long. Not the woman who taught their niece how to tie her shoes. How to say, I'm sorry. How to face the world without a mother. I stood near the back. Again. Always the back. Still invisible, even in a room full of people I had cared for. Then the lawyer entered. A tall man with thin glasses and a heavy leather folder. He cleared his throat. Sat in Edward's favorite chair. And began. He listed accounts. Properties. Charities. He spoke in that flat legal tone. The kind that doesn't pause for sentiment or memories. Until. He did pause. Just briefly. But something in his eyes shifted. He reached inside his briefcase. And pulled out a small black remote. The kind used for presentations or projectors. Caroline sat up straighter. What's that? She asked, suspicious. Before we continue, the lawyer said. Mr. Montgomery requested this video be played for the family in full. No interruptions. Caroline shifted. Her discomfort visible now. What kind of video? He didn't answer. He just pressed play. And suddenly, Edward's face appeared on the large television in the corner of the room. Not the strong man I remembered. Not the one who barked orders or sipped black coffee while reading the Times. This Edward was tired. Fragile. But not weak. His voice. Still steady. Still his. And his very first words. If Maya is in the room. I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say. Edward looked straight into the camera. His shoulders were wrapped in a thick shawl. His face gaunt, thinner than I had ever seen it. The signs of the illness had carved themselves into him. But his voice. Still the same. Firm. Unapologetic. Measured. If Maya is in the room. I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say. Everyone stiffened. All eyes turned to me. Suddenly, I was no longer invisible. Caroline crossed her arms. Nathan sat forward. His wife whispered something behind her hand. Edward continued. Maya Thompson came into this house at the worst moment of our lives. Julia had just died. Emma was days old. And I was lost. She didn't ask for attention. She didn't make demands. She just stayed. She became the one steady light in this home. And when the rest of us turned inward, into grief, or business, or distance, Maya turned outward, toward Emma. I've watched her comfort my granddaughter through every scraped knee. Every fever. Every heartbreak. His voice cracked slightly. She was there when Emma said her first word. When she lost her first tooth. When she cried at her mother's grave. The room had gone completely still. Even the clock above the fireplace seemed to pause. Edward took a breath. I've seen how some of you have treated Maya. As staff. As a servant. As an outsider. But in this house. In my house. She was never any of those things. She was family. She is family. Caroline whispered something to Nathan, but her voice was shaking. Edward went on. To my children. You all have your own homes. Your own lives. Your own fortunes. You were raised with every advantage I could offer. But this house. The house Maya turned into a home again. This house belongs to her now. Caroline stood up. This is a joke. This can't be legal. The lawyer paused the video and held up his hand. It is. He pointed to the folder on his lap. The deed transfer was filed and signed before Mr. Montgomery passed. Everything is in order. Caroline's face flushed with fury. But Edward's image reappeared on screen. As if waiting for her to be quiet. Emma will inherit everything else when she turns 21. But until then, I am naming Maya as her co-guardian. Because I trust her. Because she knows this girl's heart. Because she's earned it. And most importantly, because she never asked for any of it. She simply gave. His voice softened. Maya. Thank you. For staying. For loving her like your own. For giving this house its soul again. He looked straight into the camera. This is your home now. And then. The screen went black. Silence. Not a word. I didn't move. Couldn't. Caroline sat frozen, her mouth slightly open like the air had been knocked out of her. Nathan just blinked. And then. Soft footsteps echoed on the staircase behind us. I turned. It was Emma. She had been watching from the upstairs landing. Tears on her cheeks. That same pink bunny clutched tightly in her arms. She walked slowly across the room. Past the stairs. Past the tension. Straight to me. She wrapped her arms around my waist and whispered. Can we go home now? My throat tightened. I nodded. Yes, baby. We can. We turned. And for the first time since I entered that house. I didn't leave through the servants' hallway. We walked straight out the front door. And it closed behind us. Like a chapter finally ending. The next morning. The house felt different. It wasn't just quieter. It was softer. Lighter. As if all the tension had been packed up with the pearl napkin rings and cold glares. Caroline didn't return. Not that week. Not the next. The lawyers confirmed everything. The deed was final. The guardianship official. The house, mine. For days, I moved through the halls with care, like walking through a dream I didn't want to wake up from. But Emma. She didn't hesitate. She danced barefoot down the hallway. Painted little suns on the window panes with washable markers. Filled the quiet with music again. We opened the windows wide. Let the wind carry out the old weight. The unsaid. The pain. We repainted the living room. Not because it needed it. But because it finally could. She picked soft lavender. I picked cream. She said it looked like peace. I agreed. I let her frame the photo of her, me, and Mr. Montgomery at her 7th birthday. The one where he's smiling, genuinely smiling, while she holds a cupcake in one hand and my hand in the other. We placed it by the stairs. Right where everyone could see it. We didn't redecorate the house. We rewrote its meaning. The drawing room became our reading space. The dining room. A gallery for Emma's art. The garden. Ours now, growing wild and kind. One morning, Emma handed me a folded paper. It was one of her handmade cards, cut with dull scissors and colored in glitter gel pen. It said, "To my almost mom. Now my real one." My chest ached in the best way. I hugged her close. So close. That night, I stood outside on the porch, mug in hand, watching the wind play with the leaves. And I whispered something I hadn't said in a long time. Thank you, Edward. Not just for the house. But for the recognition. For the trust. For seeing what no one else bothered to. The next week, we hosted a small dinner. Just close friends. A few of Emma's classmates and their parents. My sister, Jasmine. When someone knocked on the door and asked, Is this the Montgomery residence? Emma ran ahead of me and said with a bright, proud smile. No. This is the Thompson house now. If you've ever been made to feel small in a place where your heart gave everything, this story is for you. Drop a comment below if this touched you. Share it with someone who needs to remember. You don't need permission to belong where you've built love. Thank you for watching. We'll talk again soon.